The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Born to be alive on such a mixed tempo. You're listening to Rosie Pekar on Until Now. If you'd like to join the live chat, go across to w4cy.com and click on the right-hand side and you can ask your questions. Today, I'm excited. The guest that I have, I've spoken to previously on a TV series that we have been quietly putting together, and features in all things unusual, unorthodox, unexplained, and often unseen. And he's known as Mephisto, and he's the host of Ghostriders Radio here within Australia. Now, to give my listeners a bit of a visual image of who I'm talking to, you know, he says I can describe him as Attila the Hun on the motorbike, but if you don't remember what Attila the Hun looks like, you know, refer to Hagrid from Harry Potter and you'll have the right visual image. So he's listening now. So welcome to the program, Mephisto.
Good morning. How are you? Or good evening over there in the United States. Yeah, Hagrid. Hello, Harry. How are you? I was actually boogieing down to Patrick and Anders, Born to Be Alive. You should put a few more bars of that on.
Oh, there normally is, and when it's restreamed later on iHeartRadio, it's nice and schmick and smooth, but I think our energy might have messed with the beat a little bit, and one listener's already thought, oh, wow, and so cool. So they've already got the visual image of him, and so now we're going to talk things. We're going to take a little trip along the dark side, I think. I always go on the light side. And don't worry, listeners, I haven't flipped sides, but it's good to shed a bit of light on the dark side so that way it's not something that's, you know, scary and terrifying. And if I give you the image of him is about the same size and the same height, and, you know, even though I'm former law enforcement and just over around 5'2" with some heels on, you know, this is a towering big guy who you wouldn't want to see down a dark alley and meet him alive, let alone, I think, dead. Yet he goes out chasing after the haunted and the unusual as a personal passion and interest that he's developed. So tell me how you developed this interest. And I'll just I'll just cut in and answer. One listener said, is he hot? Think Hagrid from Harry Potter. If that's hot,
just
he
not
sure
as
as hell is. And
I've
is
got
he
the height,
taken?
but not the width. Yes, my wife, who's law enforcement as well, and a practicing lawyer too. So that's she'd probably arrest me then sue me. But yes, dear, I am hot. Absolutely.
Thank you, Sean Connery. Now tell us about how you flipped to, because your background originally, I know from speaking to you before, was along the lines of priest, and fill me in on all the rest that I will have forgotten.
Originally started off as an architect with a very close alignment with the priesthood, that because we were always a very devout religious family, and I was made a deacon quite a number of years ago. Still kept in touch with it, but having experienced the military for a number of years, that sort of started making me ask questions about existence of God, the other side, etc. But it's our approach towards the supernatural is more of a healthy, positive attitude towards it.
Exactly. So for our listeners, like today's topic is along the lines of, you know, much that is unseen, and today is prolifically being explored. You can see all the TV programs, Most Haunted, alongside Most Wanted.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
There's all those things that go bump in the night, and that set off the EMFs and all that sort of thing. And again, I don't mind adding the awareness that there is more than we know in life. However, I want intelligent discussion or thoughts along the lines of, well, if there is something that's impacting and affecting my life and in a negative sense, what can I do about it? And that's the stance I always take. So you're at the moment still in exploring and finding more of that's unusual or not commonly discussed about?
You touched on a subject there where you mentioned explored. It's not only explored, but it's also widely exploited now, and
yes.
that is the serious danger in it, because it is actually giving the impression that this is great. Let's go out, play with some Ouija boards, and delve in things that we are not accustomed to, but we don't know what we are facing. And both myself and the Snowman, my riding partner, he's experienced a number of things in the past as well, and I've experienced a number of things along our rides. We'd stop to shelter under some godforsaken, abandoned place to keep away from the elements, and we've experienced a few things that we had the common sense to basically say, well, we know it's there. Let's not mess with it until we know what we're dealing with.
Exactly, and that's a really good point to listeners, because the unfortunate part I saw in the movie Ralph Saatchi's movie that was played by an Australian movie star, Eric Bana, in Deliver Us from Evil. And Ralph Saatchi is a New York police officer, or was in the new NYPD.
That's correct.
And has since left. But he talks of his encounters and dealings with, energies or entities, for want of a better word. I'm going to use that terminology, spirits that create problems within our lives. And he comes from a very, very religious orientated, and in my mind, quite biased slant, because there is much more in this world than just the Catholic religion. And that's actually a very young religion. And there's much that works to support and impact.
Hello.
The senses. Yeah, you're still here. It's okay, Steph. And therefore, there's much. He's portrayed it from a perspective that is more scary, doom, gloom. And I could see a lot of kids rushing out and getting a Ouija board and having a play. And those of us that explore this arena discover there's many more problems are introduced via not practicing safe spirit communication. I'll call it that. It's like a bit like a safe sex topic. So we've gone to safe spirits.
You'd be spot on there. You'd be quite accurate in that description. But I just had this mental thought of a 6-foot prophylactic over each person. So let's not go there.
I don't know why. Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess that's a little bit, in a sense, what they sort of need, but call it, the white light one that, enhances. And again, when you reach a particular level that within a Buddhist philosophy of where you incorporate your practice within your entire being, this reality is not something you're introduced to. And to put it in layman's terms, it means, if you hang around stuff that's crappy and shitty, the crappy and shitty stuff sticks to you. If you don't hang around what's crappy and what's shitty, it's not going to stick because you're not there.
Sleep with dogs, you catch fleas. It's simple as that.
That's it.
As you know, that I've been working closely with the Greek Orthodox Church, which stems right back to the apostolic times of Christ, and very close with the Hebrew and the Hasidic Hebrew and Kabbalah faiths in order to grasp, to basically know what I'm dealing with before I actually go anywhere near these things.
Yes. And as you've invited me along to a couple of hauntings, and my answer has been a resounding hell no. I mixed it up with enough crooks and thugs and bad dudes that, I don't need to get it in spirit form as well. So I'm just going to update a couple of listeners' questions here. This guest sounds very sexy. Well, I'll
Lovely.
throw that over to you, Mephisto. Actually,
Sure.
you do have that deep, dark tone.
I do. I'm a bit nasally at the moment because I've been doing drywalling upstairs.
Well, apparently, I think you might need to keep doing it for air. So other questions are, did you study this in school or does it come natural? For myself, I've been studying since I was a very young girl. And, even though at times I look like a very young girl and act like a very young girl, I'm actually a bit of an old duck these days. How about you, Stav?
Well, when we were younger, the subject of the supernatural was a little bit more acceptable within the broad community, and it wasn't both religiously and academically as children. It was, hey, that's fine. It wasn't taught in school, but I think once you actually have the exposure to it unwittingly or without consent, sort of thing, it basically becomes an interest which makes you want to find out the answers. Unfortunately, the problem is these days is people are not taking the appropriate precautions or using the correct mindset to approach these things.
Well, it could be said about anything in life. For example, we know
Exactly.
that we have a prolific case of the abuse of the drug ice. Now, again, most will think, oh, I can just do a bit of a party drug and then I'm perfectly fine. And it's, again, hell no. You mess with it.
Absolutely
it's messed
not.
with
Absolutely.
you.
Well, we're bikers. We're both well educated. We have a distinct background, but we're both bikers, and we won't go anywhere near the criminal element. Like I have been exposed to the outlaw, the 1% outfits in the past, but it's just not me. And it's for each person to actually take that into consideration with themselves and think, do I need this in my life? Absolutely not. Stay away from it. It's common sense.
Exactly. Now, you're not alone and just to bring a little bit of credibility onto the subject of dealing with the paranormal and all things unusual that don't leave a positive impact. I know there's one of the most haunted cop shops within Australia, which was often reported at night shift at Rose Bay within Australia. And
yes.
that's coming from, credible police officers, as I haven't actually ever seen a spirit or a ghost that I'm aware of. However, in saying that, I've certainly had full force effects of something that I haven't seen. Now, amongst the police, there's not just them, there's also the RAAF, which is the most haunted bases reported to be in Point Cook in Victoria. So
That's correct.
You've got lots within that area there, and even our sporting Aussie cricketers that report apparitions that they had seen at, I'm just going to come straight from a book here, which was, what page did the cricketers report it? Hang on, I'll just get this bit out here. So this is back in 2005 in June, and the team was startled by a hostile phantom believed to emerge from an ancient well beneath their rooms. So they all fled the premises, and this was reported in the newspapers at the time. So we have got, differing groups. There's obviously, millions of stories now worldwide. That's why it is such a topic of interest. Like the word paranormal had over 115 million hits on Google. So people are becoming aware there's more to reality than what you can see with the eyes. So now I just answer some other questions here, because it said, do you feel the spirits? Do you speak to the dead? And he's already answered, do you ride with the biker club? That no, he does not. So though he certainly looks as if he could, he's made a better choice.
We do have a club, but it's not
an outlaw.
No, and we don't. We're old school hardcore. Like when we go into a bar, trust me, sailors go running out.
Yes, I wish I could put up the visual image for you all, but just as we said, Attila the Hun on a motorbike, or Hagrid, the size of him, but just not the width of him, and put it all in black leather, and add the deep tone voice. And there's a few in the US going, that's my kind of guy.
Actually, I missed the US. The last time I was there, I was actually at Sturgis 2007 and Daytona Week, and absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Well, I should be actually there in around about January. So, but that's on the quiet. So now, do you feel the spirit? So now you go in a haunted places. I've got to ask the question because for me, they could tap dance on my head. I have lots of like a psychic superset around me that I utilize regularly. They all feel, they all see, they report really clearly the information they get. And I always say they can be tap dancing on my head and I have no idea whatsoever. So what do you feel or see or hear?
When we go into a place, we try not to, for example, if it's an old, abandoned, decrepit place, the ambient atmosphere of the place can trick you into believing it's haunted. However, you have to put that aside. But I do feel something. If there is something there, I know exactly what to look for and see, and most of the time they really don't want to be seen. It's as if there's some sort of rule book that basically is that they have to abide by, that basically says you can be there but don't interact, but some do and they get caught out, so to speak. My wife calls me a ghost magnet. I don't believe so, but she says they're just drawn to me, and we've had a few experiences which it has me believing that she could be quite accurate in that respect.
Well, there are certainly places that are not, we pick up, from a law enforcement background, fingerprints, a physical residue at a crime scene. So now we're talking about, I guess, emotional imprints that are a non-physical residue that can be imprinted and left behind at traumatic scenes or incidences. Have
Absolutely.
you personally come across any of those in your experiences?
The fact that you mentioned the emotional imprint, I agree 100% with you, because a lot of people say, you can't have hauntings in cemeteries because they didn't die there. Unfortunately, that's not true. I think you're very accurate in describing it as an emotional imprint, because you have people going to a cemetery, they're grieving, etc. And look at the basic composition of most of the monuments, etc. there. Granite, high quantity in quartz, and everyone knows that quartz basically
is an
traps
amplifier.
energy. Exactly. And that emotional imprint, we still haven't discovered scientifically as a human race as to what causes these things to exist, these spirits, these entities, etc. But they do exist. There's no two ways about it.
I don't get concerned about what science has shown, because science still can't show human consciousness. Yet when you look in the mirror and you're blinking your eyes, you're aware that you're obviously conscious.
Well, exactly. The wind blows, temperature rises. We can't see it, but we know it's 100% there. We've actually come up with a theory between the Snowman and myself that the composition of ghosts, a lot of people use electromagnetic meters, etc. You're on the right track, but not necessarily so. We believe that ghosts, etc., and spirits are actually embodiments of neutrino energy.
Yes, I understand neutrino energy. And again, that would be, I guess, an embodiment in absolutely everything that exists within the planet. So you can't differentiate it. So, but that might be a little bit off topic for I guess, bringing it down to all listeners being able to continue to follow.
We'll hear that one on the next episode.
Yeah. When a person has passed on, how long do they stay around? Which, again, I think that's going to come down to personal opinion, because none of us are masters or experts on the dead, irrespective that many may want to put their hand up and say, pick me, I am.
Well, this is why we're here. We're here to establish what those answers are. It's an answer that it is the question that there's not one person on this planet that hasn't sat back and thought, what happens afterwards? And it's we don't believe that we go through all this and develop all these spiritual qualities that will just go poof, dead.
Oh, of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not. I put a recent thing on my Facebook page, which I thought, summed up absolutely beautifully to do with humanity. And it was just a very simple statement that you are a ghost driving a meat coat skeleton made from stardust, riding a rock floating through space, so fear nothing. And if I were to add a bit onto it, it is because you actually are nothing. So from a science perspective,
well, literally,
nothing is what made absolutely everything. So nothing is not empty space. Nothing is actually cram-packed space that then manifests or externalizes, and that's your interior reality exteriorized in a sense. So what we have internalized in our lives, exactly, I always throw something out there for them just before they go to bed. I don't want them to have spooky dreams, is that, you know, your internals can't ever be separated from your externals, the reality that is occurring. And this is whether you're dealing with spooks or real life people. So people that are messed up already, consuming drugs, consuming alcohol, are the last people that should ever be attempting to contact spirit and source, because guess what? All you can get is like attracts like, those that are messed up in that same energy frequency. What's internalized is externalized, and like attracts like. So that's where I say, you know, these people that are seeking out of grief and overwhelmment to contact their loved ones, that in my mind is often the worst possible time, because your energy is at its lowest, flattest and most difficult, and you could be easily made vulnerable and preyed upon.
That's, you know, for a cop, you're pretty bright. Good on you. That is spot on.
I know I am. I've written, I think I'm up to my 8th book now, so I've learnt a bit along the way.
Absolutely. That's it. It's education. It's exposure to the right aptitude and attitude for what you are basically seeking out, whether it's putting together a jigsaw puzzle or doing an investigation, because as you and I are both qualified and licensed investigators, it's the same sort of thing. You have to approach it with a methodology.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm maybe trained a little bit differently to you, Stab. So,
yeah, rub it in.
But I've been asked by a listener, how do the spirits communicate with us? Now, I've got my answers here, but I'm going to go to you first.
Okay, how they communicate. Well, as I said earlier, that they seem to be following some sort of rule book. There's do's and don'ts for them. We don't know what they are, who's imposing these specific rules, so to speak. But the way they communicate, whether it's by sound, we've actually caught a number of EVPs. One recent one with the Snowman and Arlo Moon, who's one of our newer writers. He was a devout skeptic before he came with us one night. And we were asking specific questions where we got answers last time from a little girl called Anna, who had basically passed away some time. We knew nothing about it, but we went back and actually had specific questions in German because she spoke German. Mm-hmm. And she communicated in very concise vocal words. We couldn't hear it at the time. We heard some like a scratching noise whilst we were out there. But the EVPs on the electronic recorder actually were quite clear and concise. And this is twice we've been to the same place with a direct answer by this little girl. And she said that she actually passed away from mushroom poisoning. And we did a bit of historical research, took a bit of a while to do it, and established it was just that. So how is it that we are in the middle of the night at a particular cemetery? This little girl, supposedly little girl, asks a question, answers questions, and...
So when you say ask a question, how does she ask the question that you're able to hear what a question is?
Well, one particular question was in German.
But do you hear it audibly, or how are you hearing?
Well, what we do is when we can't, we ask a question, replay back, and we have to turn it way up and put it right up to our ears because it's also blowing wind, etc. out there. And we actually, sometimes we hear it, it's muffled, sometimes we don't. But what we do here, we actually ask a question in return, and then we have a response. So it's ask, response, to the point we're having a conversation with a little girl that speaks German who clearly is not there in front of 3 witnesses that can validate it.
Okay, so I just want to clarify, you're not, because again, the language we use is really important. This is my analness, having, spent many years in court, being aware of the language we use conveys a meaning. So when you say she asks a question, she's not asking anything. You're asking something and seeking a response. And that response is what you deem as a reply to that answer. And that response is electronically an electronic recognition.
That's correct. And she did at 2 stages of our last visit there actually ask a specific question. The man with the hat, which was snowy because he was wearing a hat, and why doesn't he have hair? Now this is the bit I'm going to jump in and go, how did she ask the question? So how does he have no hair? She basically, like, we didn't hear it, but Arlo basically goes, I heard a bit of a scratching there, play it back. So we play it back, tried fumbling about trying to find it in the dark there. And we played it back, turned it up, and she asked the question, who is the man with the hat?
So you hear this on your digital recording very clearly.
Absolutely.
But in German.
In German, yeah. And both myself
that's the bit I was wanting to clarify because I thought that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, well, I speak around 16 languages fluent and 4 not so fluent, but both myself and Arlo speak German quite perfectly.
Ich habe in der Schule Deutsch gelernt.
Ja.
für 6 Jahre. Aber ich habe vergessen alles.
Sehr gut. Du bist größer.
That's for our German listeners there. Now, I'm just going to catch up on a few questions here, and we'll cover them sort of in a blanket answer because there's a fair bit that's going on. So, how do the spirits communicate with us? Now, it's interesting that we've raised that topic of your form of electronic communication, but I've got to tell you that I personally had experienced, after my father passed away, twice him utilising my mobile phone. And it was only a ring. And when I did more research on it, I found out that there was also a Latvian gentleman, and his mother was from Riga, and my mother was Latvian and from Riga too, and talked about, him receiving this phone call in the middle of the night that was his mother's voice actually on the phone. And I didn't have my mother ring me on the phone as he did, but I don't know whether this is a Latvian belief or skill that makes it easier. However, my mother sent a foreigner who was in his mid-70s at the time to my door immediately after she passed to tell me that she couldn't get through to me because of my level of emotion. And this gentleman did not know me at all and said, I understand if you slam the door in my face, but your mother will not leave me alone until I come to you. So it may be, do you notice culturally any difference of ease and accessibility for communication?
I do think so, yes. I think so. A good example of that, you mentioned the mobile phone earlier. As you know, a couple of months ago, I lost someone very dear to me. He was actually, it was overseas, very dear to me, wonderful, wonderful kid. He passed away. And 3 days after that happened, I actually posted on our page, I was driving back in the middle of this cyclonic weather that we were having, and the phone rings. And I thought, I'll pull over. I looked at it, and there's his name on his phone. So I'm thinking a relative must have the phone. So I called back, and there was no answer. So I called the brother of this particular person, and he said, no, we actually buried the phone with him.
Wow!
3 days ago. And that was my first experience with a mobile phone. So I don't touch my damn phone from now on.
Well, I had it reassuring. I had one time I'd lost it in the car. And as I said, this was, my father's funeral was coming up and I knew it was important that I have my phone. I didn't know I'd lost it in my car at the time. I was just in the car and I'm looking for it. And I thought, I've got to find my phone. I need it for all the people that will be contacting me, wanting to know what arrangements were. And then all of a sudden there was a ding message, like when you receive a message.
An SMS, yeah.
And I realised, my phone is in the car and it had fallen down beside the side of the seat. So I was able to retrieve it. But then I went to look to see what the message was or who it was from, and there was absolutely no message on my phone. So it had only just dinged for me to find it.
Exactly. And to answer your question earlier in relation to the cultural aspects of it, I do believe the cultural aspects of it has a very significant basis to the exposure we have with the spirit world, because as you know, we're in the city, we've got all the electronic devices, work commitments, etc. Just completely
preoccupied.
Interferes. Yeah, exactly, spot on. Whereas our background is Greek, so in the old village mentality, etc., we don't have that much of exposure. It's closer to religion.
Yes.
There's not as much interference, so you're exposed to it, but not it's not interfered with. So it's like being able to receive a more clear message, and we're more relaxed enough to be able to take in to actually have that interaction.
Well, I think when you're accepting of it, you become allowing of it. And then once you're allowing of it, you actually look out for it and pay attention to it. I know, my son has certainly introduced more of it to me from a young age than I otherwise would have taken note of. But I'm just going to cover a few more questions so that we can cover them all with that blanket answer. So, is there a way to contact our past loved ones? Yes, we're going to cover that. Is it wrong of us to call them back to us? Okay, we'll address that. Do we need special powers to do this? Absolutely not. All you need is to have been human and be breathing. And do we scare them? And what if you can hear them while you are in a dream state? So if I go back to, is there a way to contact our past loved ones? Let's see what your answer is for that, Stav.
I think there is the ability to contact them. I think people have put a little bit too much emphasis on using clairvoyance and Ouija boards, etc. I think it's as simple as being able to speak and being able to pay attention without that everyday interference, so to speak.
Exactly. Just as you learnt many languages, and I myself know several of them as well, in order to learn another language, you start as a beginner and you don't understand originally when you are hearing someone speaking another language. However, as you practice and learn and expand more on your skills, you become more and more fluent. And I think this is just another sense for ourselves to develop, pay attention to, expand upon with our skills, and we become more fluid in respect of it. But just covering another question, which was, so do we need to take the emotions out of things to contact those who have left us? And I would say very strongly, if your emotion is joy, happiness, and appreciation, keep that emotion. If it's anything lower, get it up to speed of joy, happiness, and appreciation.
Exactly. That's exactly spot on, because if you approach something with a negative attitude and aptitude, as we've covered before, you are basically making yourself a blank slate to bring in something and feed something negative. And they do exist. We've experienced them.
Exactly. Like I mentioned earlier, those that are, strongly influenced by drugs and alcohol and then want to mess with this area, it's, that's
not
where
advisable.
one listener said, is it wrong of us to call them back to us? Now, again, that's assuming that we have this limited mentality because we see things in form. We only understand reality when it's given a form. When it's formless, we have great difficulty with our 3D brain to understand this. So if I'm formless or spirit is formless, there is no to or from. There is no go or come back. There is only everywhere. So I would say they already are everywhere. The difference is you're making yourself aware more of that presence.
That's a very good assessment. In our Greek Orthodox faith, we actually take God's existence, angels, etc., as being everywhere and not subject to mind, space, and time. So they could be two places at the same time, 1,000, etc. The same thing with this, with the actual spirit. What it'll be everywhere. Now, if you have a loved one that breaks down on the highway from Jacksonville to Miami, and they're on the side of the road, and they need to get in touch with you to help them out, then as a relative, you're going to help. But if you don't know how to get out there and fix that car, which is the same with the spirit world, if you don't know what you're dealing with, you've opened yourself a real can of hurt.
Yeah.
So,
now, I'm just enjoying one listener's comment who said, do they watch our every move? Now, are you aware that, are you worried when you shut your bedroom doors or if you're getting up to naughty stuff that you're going to be busted? I would tend to answer and say the fact that if this is all that's playing when you're dead is Channel Earth, I would think that would be a very boring one-station program. You know, there is no limit within the universe that we are able to find at this point in time. The only limit is within us. So if you now have unlimited viewing and enjoyment in absolutely every realm and dimension, do you think you're going to hold their sole focus?
Oh boy, they're going to be disappointed with me.
Exactly. So I would tend to think that they don't watch your every move. However, I would be quite sure that they would be enjoying and entertained and amazed and enthused by all that inspires and enthuses and excites you. And I'm quite sure even in your times of stress and distress, that they wish that they could be even closer to let you in on a little bit of the love that they feel so that you could have some of it for yourself.
Exactly. One particular one we've actually experienced. Now that you bring up that subject, I've actually caught in the last number of years, not as much now, which is good. Is a shadow apparition. That particular one, they do sit around and they watch, and they do not like to be noticed.
Yeah, I guess we got to go to that dark side. I've been on the light side too long. I don't stray off into the dark. So yes, so the shadows and the dark, I'm going to hand this over to you because, again, this is not an area that, you know, I immerse myself into. I have awareness of it and understanding of it. And it's just like as a cop, I had an awareness and understanding of all the thugs, the murderers, the rapists and the crooks, and I didn't associate with them. As simple as that.
That's the best way. We don't either. We don't either.
But
We're
you
people,
would come into contact with people who certainly have been, like that experience that you had that you mentioned, that young boy that threw you up against the wall and injured you. If you could share that experience and take the listeners from the start. And remember, this is a really big, like how tall are you? 6 foot, what, 3, 4?
6'2". I got short in my old age. 6'2".
You shrunk a bit. So
if I got my boots on, I'm a bit taller.
You know, and, you know, a pretty decent size, you know, in Australian lingo, bloke. So
solid.
This is his story to do with, was it an 8-year-old boy?
It was an 8-year-old boy, a very well-to-do family, very devout Christians, not messing in any nasty business or any Ouija boards or anything like that. I had a priest, I won't say his name, he's a decent priest. He needed a couple of us. I was actually helping in the altar as a deacon, so I was assisting him in the altar during services, etc. And after the service, he comes up to me and says, I need a couple of strong guys for a situation. We want to keep it nice and quiet, so I'm not going to give any specifics as to who, names or anything like that, because I'm sworn to that. But just to give the impression that there are things out there that they can physically hurt you, and it will damage your spirit in a big way. We went to this particular house, and there's this 8-year-old boy. We had priests there. There was actually 2 members of child services there as well. So that was the interesting part. And they were crying outside. They did not know what they were dealing with, because they actually tried to remove the child thinking that it was being abused, etc., but it wasn't. One of the other gentlemen that I was with, he's much bigger than I am, full on. He's a power lifter, but a sweet kid. I actually think he's gone and become a cop. He's gone to the dark side. So we went, and the priest said, you'll need to hold the boy down. You don't listen to what he says. If he says something, do not respond, etc., etc. And this child, he's an 8-year-old, approximately. He's about 4 foot nothing, very skinny. He with the doxology being read out, the Orthodox doxology, which is giving praise to the Lord, etc., and everyone and everything, giving thanks. I get thrown to the wall, and there's a big imprint where I went through the drywall.
So you get thrown to the wall by the 8-year-old child.
An 8-year-old child, with a swing of his arm.
Yes, because you were on one side, if I remember correctly, and the other large gentleman was holding the child on the other side.
Yep. And he had basically, with one sweep of his arm, and the child tried to bite him, but he didn't get the bite in, but he actually tried to strike him, and he shattered his eye socket, cheekbone, jaw, lost 3 teeth from his upper molars. And it was, I'm still shaking to this day. It's been quite a number of years, but it's something that basically said to me after that, we had to get communion afterwards and everything else, and counselling. I didn't need too much counselling.
You got injured as well, if I recall correctly.
I was injured. I received a broken right scapula. One of the ribs that I had previously injured basically snapped again. And I had a cracked T3 vertebrae.
Yeah. So all from a 8-year-old child that was under the influence of an energy that we don't want to come in contact with or mess with.
That's right. And much to the priest's credit, I wish I could say his name because he's a wonderful, wonderful man, devoted his life. He actually helped the child. They got through it. And to this day, the child's a very, very devout child, and he's quite healthy and everything else, but very positive background.
Yes. And I'm aware of one of my priest friends that operated under the radar for the Catholic Church in a lot of third world countries, performing exorcisms as such, that has told me stories that, raise the hair on the back of my neck exactly the same. So that's where I don't put myself into those environments. However, the one thing where I differ greatly from what Ralph Sarchi talks about in Deliver Us from Evil and his own book is the fact it's presented so one-sided, as almost as if to say that if you're not Catholic, you're doomed. Now, I just want to lay that to rest right here and now, that if you think that there is a being that prefers only one type of practice, ritual, way of being that's only very new on this planet, then you need to turn your thinking parts on and go do some research and homework for yourself. Every single person walking this planet is loved and connected. Every single person walking this planet has their own direct divine link, hookup, protection, you name it. There is not one of us that is excluded by race, by sex, by colour, by creed, by some man-made dogma that has been introduced by man and stolen and said, this is man's word at all times, that is putting this forward. So if it works well for your life and empowers you and empowers others, by all means, adopt it, embrace it, use it. If it disempowers you, disempowers your friends, your loved ones, disempowers those that you come into contact with, you need to get one hell of a better religion, because there is no part of religion that is about hate ever in any way.
Absolutely.
There's my Rosie soapbox.
I'm lighting a match and stomping my foot over that one. That is spot on. As you know, well, I'm good friends with the preacher Sam Childers from Pennsylvania. He actually helps out a lot of kids over in South Sudan. He's actually found religion from a very bad background. Wonderful man, and he's actually brought that inner peace out of him, and he's he's a very good example of what you just said. That's spot on.
Exactly. And that's what for people, because some get afraid in the dark, some get afraid that, they haven't done whatever penance is, they haven't, crossed whatever they're meant to cross. It's like this is superstition that is preying on mind, which is preying on humankind. Our internals, as I said earlier, is what gets externals. So the more ways that you can find to lighten up and let loose and realize that you are an energy, that meat suit on a skeleton that's floating on a rock.
That's it.
And realize that you are eternal in that. You are that eternal ghost. You are that eternal spirit. You are forever connected to it. So the more that you lose your fear of death whilst alive, the more you'll realize that you were born to be alive eternally. And that is
alive.
That's it. That's the one. And that's been the purpose of until now. The program was that, all we know up until now. It doesn't mean that that's all there is to know. It just means this is the point we're at right now. There's always more to know. There's always more to learn. There's always more to discover. But, there's more programs coming out dealing with the dark side, and they're taking it, tongue in cheek. When, again, I had my own experience, which is part of what I've shared with the start of this other program, which is where I was flung. I'm only small, but I was flung out of my bed and slammed into a wall. And this was in my earlier years as a police officer, first 3 or 4 years. And I didn't dare tell anyone because I knew I would be laughed at and mocked and ridiculed. And they would have said, "Rose, how much did you have to drink before you fell out of bed?" And it happened not once, not twice, but 3 times. And the third time was that painful that it forced me to go and explore and find out more for myself. So I guess that's part of the purpose of today's program, is for people, if you're going to start watching those programs that are really negative and put you in a state of fear, that's you altering your own internals and your own emotions. And if it's not making you feel good, you are inviting in more of what's unwanted, not wanted.
Exactly. That's as I said before, that is spot on. The programs that are going out these days are actually just breeding a very negative and malign environment. As the secret to spirituality, or noticing what is there or what isn't there, is paying attention. Pay attention to your limitations. Pay attention to what it's trying to say. If you get the idea, use your instincts. The instincts are basically that built-in mechanism that basically tells you this is good, this isn't good.
Exactly. We all speak spirit.
We do.
So those that would like to listen to your program, Ghostrider, where can they go to?
Okay, they can go to YouTube, look for Radio Ghostriders. You'll see our first season there. We're actually putting together our second season, and we're doing a bit of touring backwards and forwards at the moment for another project. And you can listen there, or you can go to the Facebook group page, Radio Ghostriders. You'll see 2 knuckles with 2 of the rings, Meph and Snowman. We've always got we've got a little bit of profanity on there, but that we're bikers for God's sake. so
that's all right. I put you on good behaviour for being on this program. You'll be released shortly.
Oh no. We're talking to a general audience, and of course a specific level of decorum is required. We're bikers, but we're not completely uneducated. But being bikers, we get to see a lot of stuff, go to a lot of places, and experience a lot of things. I think being bikers has been a very good mechanism for us to be able to reach all these different new subjects, and it's great. But keeping positive is the secret. The minute you go negative, get out, stay away from it.
Exactly, because that's where, I wish they did the TV program of what happened after, like after Most Haunted, after all these programs where these people went in and stood there and said, come on, if you're here, show yourself, I'm not afraid of you. And, do the follow-up program of how did their finances go? How did their relationships go? How did their health go? And tell that story, because that's the untold story that's being shared. It's a bit like the movie stars, the where are they now?
Where are they now? Exactly. Look at Jan Michael Vincent, poor guy. But I personally, we do not go anywhere near those shows. I don't think we've seen a show since Sightings, I think in the late 90s. Those Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, I don't think we've seen any of those shows yet, and we won't see those shows because we don't want it to pollute our perception of what we're finding.
So for those that are going to indulge in some of that, light a candle afterwards, make sure you have some light-hearted laughter, music playing, jingling. It's like clearing and cleaning, and if there's dust and debris, you clean up afterwards. So the same thing. But
that's exactly right.
Really appreciated having you on here today, Mephisto. I'm quite sure we've got lots more we can talk about on another occasion.
It was great having me here.
Yes, it was. And for those that are after a little bit more inspiration and onto the light side, go to kickbuttwith1t.com.au, because I am Australian. Until next week, you've been listening to Rosie Pekar on Until Now. Thanks, Mephisto.
Thank you, Rosie. Have a wonderful time.
Bye.